Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik. In this episode, you will discover how landscape architecture can transform not just spaces but entire ecosystems. Our guest will share his journey from corporate disillusionment to creating sustainable biodiverse gardens around the world. Expect to learn practical tips on how you can make a positive environmental impact, whether you are a landowner, hotelier, or just a passionate about greener living. So welcome, Matthieu Mehuys. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Sam, thank you very much for the beautiful introduction. Like I said before we started, I'm super excited to dive deep into the hotel industry and how landscape architecture can be a huge benefit to that.
Very good. We'll share some anecdotes here along for everyone to see what, so we have a chance to kind of talk about the actual the reality of landscaping and the importance of it and so on. But just before we get started, Matthieu is a award-winning author also about this topic, and he has given the sort of a green light for me to announce that a book will be raffled to anyone who is actually commenting or reviewing this podcast on Apple Play. So this episode that you are listening to now or watching on video will be out on the 24th of August. So you will have a chance until the end of the month to review it, and I will then review it, read all those, and I will raffle, and we will make sure that a nice book signed by Matthieu will be reaching your post box soon after that. So let's get
Yes.
started. For our audience to get some background, can you tell me about your professional experience and why you dedicated to landscape architecture and how that became your passion?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to answer that, Sam-Erik, I go back in time, and I go way back in time because I grew up on a family farm. My father and my brother are farmers still today. We have an active farm in Belgium, where I'm from. And ever since I was super young, I think it was around the age of 3 years old, one of my earliest memories as a child was like, if you have a little seed and you put it in contact with the earth, how fascinating it is that it can grow into a plant, in some cases grow into a huge tree. For example, a huge oak tree, you've seen them in the landscape. It's the moment I start to realize that at that age, I was just mind blown because I grew up on the farm. I would go out with my father in spring to check on the seeds if everything is growing. So I was kind of like connected to that already from a very, very early age. But then at that time on the farm, the main productions of the farm was cash crops like grains and cattle. So we didn't really have a vegetable production or anything like that. And I was going to school, that was then around the age of 5 years old. And I had one teacher that was teaching us everything about plants. We had a small vegetable garden. And I think every school curriculum should have vegetable growing or vegetable gardening as part of their teachings. But from that early experience, I came home and I told to my parents, said like, hey, I want to start growing my own food. I want to have my own little garden. And they said, no, we don't have time for that. You know, it's a farm. And my parents had to work a lot. They said, no, we don't have time. The garden is already made. There's no space for it. But I persisted and I said, I really want to do this. At some point, they told me, like, there in the back of the garden, there's a small space. You can start using it. Here's some seeds. Do whatever you want. And then from that early age, I also got fascinated by design because I still remember I was looking on the farm for old stones, and I would arrange my garden in like a typical four square garden. And I was also like, I was so satisfied by doing that, like preparing the soil and then making a nice design. And then, Sam, what happened is that for some reason I started to grow radishes. And anybody who wants to start growing their own food, even people in the hotel business, I think start with just growing some radishes in the hotel. You don't need much space for that even, and it's super easy. In a couple of weeks, you have radishes that you can harvest. You can mix it into your salads, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like at the age of 5 years old, harvesting my first radishes, going to my mother, and then we were eating it. I was just like so fascinating. And then I thought, wow, this is super easy. So what I'll do next is I'll buy a bunch of seeds. And I didn't buy it. I asked my father, of course. So we went to the shop, bought like all the seeds there are, salads, tomatoes, carrots, everything. I like bought it all because I was so excited. And then I thought, now I just spread the seeds in my garden, and I come back a couple of weeks later, and it'll be full of fresh vegetables, fresh produce. And I think, Sam-Erik, you can already guess what happened next. I went to a summer vacation at my cousin's. I was doing some other stuff on the farm. Actually, by the way, at that time, I was also starting my own egg business. So I had 12 chicken, and I was taking care of them after school, selling my eggs left and right. And actually, my brother is still doing that today in an organic way, much bigger, of course. And then what happened is I came back, and the whole garden was overgrown by weeds, because it's also in a specific soil, our farm, that it's super hard clay soil. So it's a very rich soil, but it's difficult to work with it. So I had to put a lot of compost in, but I had no clue what I was doing. So the weeds took over everything, and I was devastated. I was like, how is this possible? Like, I want to have a vegetable garden where I can eat, but then the weeds are taking over. And then, Sam-Erik, actually pretty much the rest of my life came from that moment, in the sense that I really wanted to understand how things work. Like, also as a child, my sister had like small toys, and I would always have to break it open to understand the mechanism inside. Even though I'm not an engineer or I'm not interested in that, I just want to understand how things work. And that's actually the topic of my book, 12 Universal Laws of Nature: How to Get the Most Potential Out of Your Land. Is that when you start to understand how nature works, you can use it, or you can leverage in your advantage. Because if you work with nature, it's like sailing in the wind, and you take advantage of it. Because what I see mostly in landscape architecture, in gardens, in a lot of things that we're doing outdoors, we're trying to fight against nature by using chemicals, by doing maintenance, and oftentimes in a completely wrong way. And that's also very costly, because then you have to keep doing it. There's no sustainability or ecology around it. So yeah, it started from that early experience. But then obviously when I studied like economics and modern languages until I was 18. I really had to study a lot to get that degree. So I was kind of fed up with studying theoretical stuff. So I said, okay, I want to learn something practical. And I had that early experience with gardening, so it kind of was like an obvious choice to start studying landscape architecture, garden design. I did a bachelor's in Belgium. Then I went to Germany to do a master degree, because I wanted to work on bigger projects, and Germany is like top countries in landscape architecture. So then I got my master degree, thinking like, okay, this is it. I'm gonna get a 9 to 5 job, because that's how things should be. Got like a nice suitcase, started my first job in Germany, in Munich at the time. And by the way, I can highly recommend a visit to Munich. It's a beautiful city. It has actually the biggest landscape park in the world inside of the city. So it's a really beautiful area to live. So I lived there for 5 years, and I did my 9 to 5 job, and I'm actually very grateful that I did it, because I learned to like systemize things. I'm a very creative person, but in Germany you learn to use structure, and so that's some great skill that I added from working in Germany. But after doing that for 2.5 years, I kind of fell in a trap of like becoming depressed, doing a 9 to 5 job, doing a lot of bureaucracy, still learning a lot. But I was like, I'm not put on this planet somehow to do this. Like, I could see myself being in that job for 10 years and not much changing. I was like, no, I want to do more, bigger things. But I didn't have a network. I didn't have anything. So I just said, okay, what can I do? I love traveling. I love surfing, and I want to see the world to look at projects that are doing amazing job when it comes down to ecology, regeneration, ecotourism. So I packed my backpack. I contacted a lot of eco resorts, farms that I want to volunteer on their place. They took me. I could live there like for free, or was doing some work in the garden, and I could observe like how does their water system work? How can they incorporate permaculture? I was then also taking a permaculture course in India, so I pretty much traveled the whole world pre-COVID, so it was still relatively easy. And then an amazing thing happened, Sam-Erik, is that I was then going to the Amazon rainforest because I had been traveling for 1.5 years, and I had like a freelance job through a company in Germany, so I could work from my laptop. I was surfing, visiting places. So my life was like pretty good, even though I was nearly broke, but it was a great life. So then I went to the Amazon rainforest, and it was the most amazing experience ever. Like for me personally, and anybody who's listening, I think if you have the chance to go to the depth of the Amazon rainforest, that was in Ecuador, and I was just like mind blown. Like trees the size of apartment buildings, so many biodiversity. It was incredible. But then what happened is that I got sick during that trip. I got dengue, which is like kind of like malaria, and I was really like I lost 10 kilos, and I think that was Mother Nature telling me like, hey, you traveled enough, you've seen enough of like what's working in the world. Now it's time for you to start doing something with it, like create your own business or something. And I can only tell this story in retrospect. When I'm doing all these things, I can't. So then, long story short, came back to Belgium, started my own business, Palonia Landscape Architects, where we really focus on creating beautiful designs and adding the aspect of ecology and bringing that together. Because oftentimes, what people think is that you can create a beautiful landscape, but it is not biodiverse, or you can create a beautiful nature, but it will kind of look messy. So I said, no, it can be, because I saw it in many projects across the world. You can perfectly bring these two things together. In fact, it has so many benefits to do it in such a way that it's very beautiful to see that once you start working with nature, like I said, you can then become far more successful. You can be way more efficient. The experience, how people experience your garden or your landscape, or it's just a whole other level. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Many of our viewers and listeners are in hotel development, and of course you have done hotel projects and done the landscape for them. And I would be interested, based on this tremendous experience that you have gained from a very, very early age and with your passion. It would be interesting to learn about your perspective on how traditional hotel construction methods impact the natural landscape and how this approach needs to evolve in the context of sustainability that we talk about.
Oh, I love this question. So, like you said, when a new construct, like if it's a renovation of a new existing hotel, then even then, building a hotel, it has a big impact on the landscape. We don't have to lie about it. It's like big machines. I've seen the constructions, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing. We're creating something new. We're just like in nature, a new house is being built. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I can see also that there's a lot of opportunities to be part of the design and planning process on an early stage, because oftentimes what I see in the constructions is like they will start bulldozing the land, and when it comes down to the health of the soil, the top layer of the soil, which is like the skin of our planet, oftentimes they just bulldoze it to the side, they mix it with other bad soil, and then when the whole construction is finished, they put everything kind of back in place. They stick a couple of trees in, and then there's problems like trees don't grow, the garden doesn't really look very fit. It doesn't work. So I think when you are part of the planning process from an early stage and actually invest a little bit more in the front end, when you then go to the back end, you will actually save a lot of money, because then when you respect the soil and you keep the soil aside and you do it in the right way, also when you have a design that comes from the analysis of the landscape, rather than coming into a project and like, this is where we're going to put the building. No, let's start with analyzing the whole landscape. Like, how does everything move? How does the water move? Like, that's a big topic. You can actually use the design in a certain way, which is called keyline design, that you can absorb more water. So then you're designing the whole landscape to optimize the amount of water that you can store both in the soil, so your plants will grow better, so the experience of the people that coming to your hotel will be way better, but also to store it so that you can use it for the showers, hotels, for the showers, even for the water consumption, and then also come up with a whole system where the water can be completely reused.
Yeah.
So these are some things, and I think when it comes down to the financial aspect, we have to do the calculation, do the numbers, but then show also in the back end how much you will actually save when the hotel is running and you have a system. Pretty much you're creating an ecosystem in that sense. Then it will be so much more efficient.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, there are projects where the developer fully understands the importance of landscape and landscape architecture. But how do you ensure it's given the attention it deserves from the very beginning of the project? I mean, particularly the developer who is not an expert. Then they understand beauty, they understand all that. They're also looking at the costs, and then they have to make some decisions on how they're going to approach this. But coming in to give the best advice to the developer, and so the end result will be pleasing for not only for the development but also pleasing for the customer that will be enjoying the area. So just to recapitulate, how do you ensure that landscape architecture and this part of the design is giving the attention it deserves from the very beginning of a project?
Yeah, I think that the approach that I have is pretty much the same for private clients. It will be a little bit different for when it comes down to a hotel or eco resorts. What I find super important is to understand the owner, the people that will run the hotel, like really investigate. Like I even teach people how they can design, create, and maintain their own garden online in a masterclass. And one of the first steps is to go deep into the investigation. I tell them, you are Sherlock Holmes. You have to understand the local climate. In this case, you would have to understand the owner, the developer, what excites them. Do they like natural beauty? Do they love beautiful design? Like really, really, really deeply understanding that. Because if I come in and I say to the developer, "Oh, we have to put a tree here, and this is perfect there," I didn't even listen to them. Like, what do they want to create? Is it
Yeah.
like a super high-end hotel? Is it more like a boutique hotel? What do you want to create? That's super important to really investigate. And then what I do is we start dreaming. We start dreaming as big as we can. Like I say, there's no cost to dreaming big. Like, you can obviously get to the reality later, but let's like put everything open without any limitations, and then how can we create that in a long term?
Yeah.
So I really start a deep conversation with the people that are in charge, even later on the people that will manage or run the hotel. I think that is definitely key. And then on top of that is also bringing it very visually. So now we have now an architect that is working with us who is like a genius in 3D design. So we can visually present it very well. And I also have, because rendering it can be a little bit tricky, you can make everything look good, but I have the eye to say like, okay, this is a 3D render that we can actually create, not just like something that is nice looking, because yeah, you
What are
understand as well.
yeah, very good. What are some key misconceptions developers and architects have about landscape architecture? And knowing that, because I'm sure you're sitting around the table in the project office and or the meeting room, and you have the developer in front of you, you have the architect, and just give some examples of what you have gone through, and particularly interesting is how you address these when collaborating on a new project, so that you can bring in sort of the beauty and everything you're dreaming of to the project.
Actually, the way I want to answer that question is to actually refer to our family farm. So our family farm is not necessarily a place where you can sleep, even though we're considering adding like tiny houses on the farm. But what happened over the last 7 years is that we completely redesigned the farm. And I, like when I was 18, we started planting trees, we started adding parts of the garden. Now this whole redesign has created such a huge value that people are coming from all across Belgium to come to the farm to do a visit. Now, if we wouldn't have invested in creating a beautiful environment around the farm, people would still come because we're like in the forefront of regenerative farming, which is good for the environment and it's good for the farmers. So there's already something exciting to see or to experience. But now people just come here and they are like mind blown. And it's obviously a cost. You have to maintain it. If you have a landscape, if you have a garden, you have to do some work in it. And just to give you an example, the garden has a cost of 20,000 in maintenance a year, but that is earned back a lot more because we can get people to experience the garden. They can cut flowers. Like it's definitely an investment that gives you the return that you need. So I think the big misconception is that landscape is something that is an extra cost, something that like it's going to cost you more, and we don't like when we do the calculations, it doesn't fit. So I think that is a huge misconception because it can create value, and I think for a hotel, it could be an interesting avenue to explore to also add different income streams. Like I've seen that as well, that the hotel can open its doors for other visitors, maybe not in all of the project, but maybe in the vegetable garden or the garden that is a little bit separate from the rest of the hotel, so they can actually finance the vegetable garden that they can use the produce for the kitchen, and then the visitors who are staying in the hotel can also go to that garden for free, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think it's really about connecting dots, trying to find as many different income streams so you can then cash flow everything in the back end. And definitely it's all about the experience. Nowadays, the weather we have global warming in a lot of places, which means the positive side of that is that we can spend more time outdoors in a lot of places of the world. So I'm not saying that an indoor of a hotel is not important. It's still really important. But how do you experience arriving to the hotel? Like you have to go through a landscape to arrive. How does that look? What experience do you have? Is it like something else than what's in the outside of the hotel? Like,
Yeah.
do people get an immediate feeling that it's something different?
I love that comment you made, because the hotels that have made, for me, an impression is that arrival experience. There's a surprise element. And I also compare a hotel experience to like an operatic. So, the traditional opera that starts kind of gently, and then there's maybe drama there, and then there's a grand finale. And that arrival is kind of a building up that excitement for what to expect. And of course, there is that human element, which is important, but that arrival experience is usually the first impression that the guest will have when they're arriving to a place. And that might be the thing that sets the tone for the entire stay, so I really, really appreciate that you mentioned that. And I cannot emphasize more than how important this part of is.
Yeah, and I think what I want to add to this is that I've come across a book that is called Architecture Without Architects. And I think it should be the same for the landscape, because this is something that I learned through my study when I was living in Munich, this biggest landscape park in the world. When you are in that park, it feels completely natural and it even looks bigger than it already is. But then I investigated that throughout my study, and the way it has been designed is that it's every tree and every plant is put in a specific way so that the experience of going through the landscape is way more diverse than like you could experience in a natural world, even though it is a natural world, but it's completely man-made. So I think using the space that you have and designing it in such a way that it looks very natural, but it also just feels right, is a huge opportunity as well
Yeah.
for a hotel business.
Yeah, I like the idea of that when you're creating the landscape and then you work with kind of architects that has also a vision that you try to save every single tree that has already been there for the longest time. And so you somehow incorporate what's natural and then design around it. What is your thought about that approach to design in terms of in resorts, for instance?
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think that's part of the analysis. I think, but I also have to say, I wouldn't, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I wouldn't shy away to sometimes cut down a tree, because it's also, even in the natural world, sometimes a tree is being attacked by other animals.
Yeah.
Even experienced that in the Amazon rainforest. I was walking through it. All of a sudden, one tree was completely taken apart by ants. They were destroying the tree. So I'm not saying like come into a project and destroy all the trees. No, no, no. What I want to say is like if there's a specific reason to cut down a tree that will enhance the biodiversity, that will enhance the experience, do it and just plant three new trees or more trees like
Yeah.
somewhere else. So I don't like it's definitely something that we have to be very cautious about, but it should not really be a limitation,
Right,
even
right.
though with permits sometimes in some parts of the world it's not that easy. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, in our previous discussion, you have mentioned about the personal dream of creating space that combines hospitality, food production, and community building.
Yes.
What are the essential elements needed to make such a vision successful? Because you are a visionary, and I can see that. How close are you to achieving it?
Yeah, it's a big dream of mine to actually create like a project that has all of the elements that I am a strong believer in. So yeah, like I said, I grew up on a farm, and I think the more we can produce food locally and do it in a way that it's good for nature, which is totally possible. Some people might not be aware of it, but that's what is called regenerative farming. So you're producing food and you're restoring the soil. You're actually storing a lot of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And in fact, if 70%, the research shows that if 70% of the farmers would change to that system, to move away from the chemical industrial model, we could be in pre-industrial revolution amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So pretty much we could reverse climate change in 7 years. Some we're like oftentimes in like doom thinking, like this is it, we've destroyed everything. But if we work with nature again, we can speed up the regeneration process. And I think these kind of projects, hotels or even developments or a combination of both, they have the, in my in my opinion, also the responsibility, but they also have the opportunity to start implementing that, because it adds to the experience of the people that come to the hotel. So yeah, in my dream project, you have like people that are living on the land. You have some developments, maybe medium term stay, long term stay, and then also a hotel. And then there's like a lot of things that you can experience, the gardens, renaturation project, like adding some lakes to add more water to the landscape, like really looking like let's have an empty canvas, do the analysis of what is already there, and now let's dream really big. That's actually what I tell, like you start small, dream big, and then move fast. So when you have the big dream, and then every day it's only you can only do a small amount of things. So yeah, I think that is a huge opportunity, because not only that it's like, oh, it sounds very nice and it sounds very appealing. I think it will become inevitable in a way that, if because we're seeing a huge wave of green, we can call it greenwashing. I don't really like the word greenwashing. I think it's even a good thing. Why not do greenwashing? Like, it's marketing. You can see all of the big brands in the world Porsche, Dior. Every new campaign has something with greenery, and they're all at the back end. They do some planting for trees. It's definitely not enough, but still, there's like a huge trend in having a green image. Now, if you build a hotel and you just like build the hotel in an industry that's already suffering, we don't have to lie about it. I think it's picking up again. But how are you going to set yourself apart? Okay, you could get a beautiful interior design, but that's already like there are already a ton of hotels that have beautiful interior, that have beautiful architecture. Why not do something or do that, of course, but then go the extra mile? Because this is what one of my mentors said: there's no traffic on the extra mile. And I think with landscape architecture and doing it in a beautiful way that sets you apart from the rest, that's the extra mile. And it's
Yeah.
not easy, I'm going to tell you, because landscape comes at the end of the project where everybody's already fed up with construction, extra costs. But if we just push a little bit further, and it's not a huge cost, we can do it in a way that you can start regenerating the land with a low budget, but you need to know how to do it exactly. I think, yeah, combining all of this is the way forward.
Sure.
Like, it will become inevitable in that sense
Yeah.
that if you don't do it, you might be out of business.
Yeah. I have a question maybe that relates to this. How do you balance the demands of creating a visually appealing landscape with the need for ecological and environmental sustainability in your design?
Yeah, great question. It's very simple. Like in the design, you just make functionality for the users, and then the way it's done, that it's also good to enhance the landscape, it all fits together. It's like as if all of a sudden everything falls into place. That's what I do when I start a project. I print it out on a huge paper. I get my tracing paper and I just start scratching. And somehow time and space dissolves, and all of a sudden there's like a new design. Obviously, not always it's like fast, but there's something beautiful when I start doing the design. And I think you can experience that as well. That then everything kind of falls into place. And I think when a design is done well for a landscape or a garden, the functionality enhances the biodiversity, and the biodiversity enhances the functionality. And it's done in a way where then as a management team for the hotel, you also know, like, and that's what we do in the back end. We create the beautiful design, and we already know, like, oh, we're gonna have to maintain it that in this way. And so at the back end, when the project is finished, we also walk with the client and say, like, okay, here's a management plan. This is what you have to do at what time. Here are the average hours that it will take. And like we've seen some amazing results in some gardens that we really started to push a lot in creating a super biodiverse garden. So we use techniques like incorporating super high quality compost. We do mulching, which is a massive, it's a big game changer when it comes down to maintenance. And you actually give a boost to nature. So all the plants that you want to grow, they grow faster, so they cover the area faster. So your maintenance drops like drastically. So again, it's a little bit more of an investment, maybe like 5% in the front end, but it eradicates your maintenance costs. So it's a win-win in that sense.
Very good. Um, for resort at the end is about the well-being of the guest and how they feel about the place. So what role do you believe landscape architecture plays in the mental and physical well-being of guests at the hospitality venue? Can you maybe provide some example from your past projects which could illustrate your approach to this?
Yeah, that's a really good one. So we all come from nature. We all came from nature, and because of industrialization, because of growing cities, because of, yeah, maybe also education system that is part of the industrial system, I would say, we got disconnected from nature. And it had a lot of benefits. Like we have beautiful houses, structure, clean water, roads, like a lot of the practical stuff is great. So there's nothing wrong with the way our humanity has evolved. because it's all about creating more comfort in our lives. But at the downside, there's a couple of things that we forgot. We forgot to stay connected with nature. And it's scientifically proven that when you spend time in nature, it just creates a better spirit for you. So, and they've actually, what I've from some research that I've done, the reason, like, if you sit outside and you can listen to the birds, it creates an immense joy, and just like you feel really relaxed automatically, like if you really tune in. And the reason why this is that in the times when we were still living as a bushman in the wild nature, we would we would be walking, we would be doing things, maybe collecting fruits, hunting, whatever. And then there was the in between time where you would sleep or relax. So you would lay yourself down in the middle of the forest, and when you could hear birds singing, it was a sign of safety.
Yeah.
So you know there's no big predators or any other animals that you wouldn't like. So that if there would be a lion approaching, all of a sudden the birds would stop singing and you would know something's coming. So that's the actual reason why we like it so much and why it's so appealing. So knowing that this is our human nature, that's how we evolved, and it's only been a couple thousands of years that we changed the way we connect with nature. So our DNA cannot evolve that fast with it. So I think it's an essential part to have that experience as part of a hotel experience. Even so, like you said, we talked about the blue zone hotels. This is all part of it. You can learn also when you come to the hotel, like, what does it mean regenerative gardening? What does it mean regenerative food? What does sustainability mean? Can I learn something about how water is managed, so that people not only experience something to relax, because that's why people go on in a hotel. The experience is amazing. You don't have to do anything. Everything is done for you. That's like the orchestra that you're saying, that mind-blowing experience. And then part of that mind-blowing experience could be like you go home and think like, wow, I actually learned a lot about how you can reduce the maintenance in your garden. And oh, I think the water system, that's so clever, the way they're reusing the water. Maybe we could do something like that at home. Or I think it's really like a spark
Yeah.
that you can give to your guests that they can take home. And then they will tell it to their friends, be like, have you been, we've been to that hotel and it has all this amazing nature experience. So yeah, I think in that
Good.
sense, it's essential.
There is an old wisdom that says life is the best teacher, nature is the best preacher. I wonder what does it mean to you?
Yeah, um, I think it's a good thing that I've come to learn as well, that if you have any like problems in your life or you're facing some challenges, and experiencing or going to a hotel could be part of that. But go into nature and you'll get all of your questions answered. That's another quote that I don't know who said it. That there's something that, okay, we're working behind our computers, kind of being disconnected, or connect. We're now connected globally, so there's nothing wrong with it. But sometimes it can be too much, right? And then if you go into nature and even work in a garden, I can highly recommend people, just even the hotel managers, maybe every in part of their manage part of their schedule should be, okay, go work in the garden for 1 hour, because it will release a lot of things. And it's actually proven that if you stick your hands in a healthy soil, the soil is full of microorganisms. And that's also, if you could do a forest, you can walk in the forest, touch the trees, it's the same thing. But if you actively garden, it's even better, because the microorganisms can get absorbed by your skin, and it improves your gut health and your brain health, something that is now actually being proven to be the main cause of all of the modern diseases, is that our gut health is being destroyed by all of the chemicals in the food that we eat, also in the environment that we are, or even in the products that we use, soaps, whatever, all the chemicals that we surround ourselves with. It destroys the gut, and then it leads to cancer, diabetes, all of the modern diseases. So actively working in a garden or in a healthy environment, which the hotel could definitely be that, it'll have a huge impact on your health, on your mental health, because also the brain health is very dependent on microorganisms. In fact, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a funny thing because of uh, when you manage a hotel in a resort, you tend to be so absorbed about the daily challenges, the guest issues, and your spot checking things that things are perfect. But I think your idea that you know spend a couple of hours in the garden a week or whenever you can, I think will calm you down and kind of puts you, kind of brings you your pulse to a kind of a level where you can feel more kind of energized by doing some with your hands something. And I think that's actually a good tip. I have to remember to give some that tip too. And it's one of your Matthew's tip here for all the hotel general managers. Remove your tie and then go to the garden and do some heavy lifting there, or if not heavy lifting, but just do some beautiful work, and you're part of the solution of your hotel. How do you foresee the role of landscape architecture evolving in the hospitality industry over the next foreseeable future, especially with the increasing focus on sustainability and climate resilience?
Yeah, I think that again, it's a huge opportunity for any new hotel or a hotel that needs a big renovation to look at how can we manage our energies more efficiently, because that's what it's all about. Food is energy, the water we need. How can we do that? Okay, let's think. Okay, the one thing that has the most impact is how is the complete land managed. Like, if you start building a whole hotel, and then after you finished the construction, and then you think like, oh, we should have added a water system that is more ecological, or we should have added this, then it's too late. Like, that's why I mean, building or renovating a hotel is a huge opportunity. Even though existing hotels can also do it with maybe minimal impact, but still, I think using the skills that landscape architects have, which sets us a little bit apart from architects and other designers, because we can understand how does nature work, how does ecology work, how does the exact location of that place work, both in topography, what is the existing vegetation, and how can we enhance that, because nature is under a lot of pressure with climate change. But actually, we can use climate change to our advantage and create something that is different, that it has a much more deeper experience for the users of the hotel.
Okay, so just on a personal side, you shared your interesting personal story how you got started. But if you would have to rethink again, what would you advice would you have given your younger self if you would on the start of your career? What would you have done differently if you, considering all the experience that you have gained already now, or would you change anything?
That's a really good question, Sam-Erik. I never got asked this question, so I have to think shortly. I think I wouldn't change anything, because okay, there's the difficult moments, but every time there's a difficult moment, it's a huge learning curve, and then it goes to the new next opportunity. So I would not necessarily eradicate all the hardship, but maybe the one thing I would say is like worry a little bit less. Everything's gonna be fine. Like, you're on a big mission, but also take the time to not necessarily to relax, but don't get caught up in overthinking or being nervous or stressed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. And also, certain setbacks is actually that's where you learn things. It's not only the we seem to be nowadays with all the social media and the success stories. People only want to share the glossy side of things, and in reality, you don't learn anything from that success. You learn from the setbacks that you had. So and but also, I think your comment about not to worrying too much. I think that's a very good advice for anyone at any age, in fact. So good.
Just sweat it out.
Yeah, exactly. You have a couple more questions before we wrap up this very interesting discussion. One question I like to ask all my guests, besides what we have talked about, uh, you're traveling around the world. What other trends do you see happening in hospitality that hoteliers should take note of? Is there something that you have now that you have noticed that this is something that interesting? Now, trend is maybe a word which is overused, but maybe you see some development or happening that you think this is a that people should pay attention to.
Yes, one big trend that I see is to start designing and developing in a way that also enables a lot of flexibility, because we're in a time that everything is changing so fast that whatever you design or create now could be out of fashion or out of interest in a very fast time. So this is something that we're focusing on in commercial developments, but it could be, it's some idea that I started to work on now as well in the hospitality business is like, okay, let's design something, but let's also leave some room for maybe a potential land use change in the future. Let's not necessarily fix everything. And I think one great way of doing that, for example, is to design a hotel with, for example, with tiny houses. Like, let's create separate units that have everything that a normal person to live also needs. So who knows, you can then also, even then, if the model now, like now the Airbnb model has exploded a lot. Now it's changing again a bit. So it means like people prefer to be like more independent. That's because of COVID, I would say. But then now also I think people are moving back again to like, I do want to experience the complete hotel experience, which is something completely different. So if you're developing a new project, why not keep it open so you can do both things? Like, you can design the main building as a community space so that there's a kitchen, there's a meeting room, everything that a hotel has. But if the market says like we want to experience more long-term stays, because for example, digital nomads, which I have been, I would love to stay for a couple months, then the hotel could also have a different function. So, but still you're flexible to say, okay, we're going to do a combination even of short-term and long-term stay, because maybe that's another huge advantage for the experience of the people that come there. Imagine that you have a couple of people that are long stayers, maybe artists, and then they have the short people and they can interact, and there's a whole new dynamic. So I think, yeah, I think that is the biggest trend that I see. And obviously you cannot keep everything open. You do have to make like critical decisions, but doing it in a way that allows land use changes in the future is really important, because I've seen that in like I said, in a commercial building, which the commercial real estate business is also like, it was eradicated, like destroyed. But then this one project that I analyzed deeply was like, okay, in commercial real estate space, they had a bookstore, a cafe, they had office spaces, there's a plant center, you can buy plants, there's a huge greenhouse, so they're producing some food. Like, try and be creative on the functionalities as well. So because that commercial property that I refer to now, it was never out of business. Like, people enjoy it so much to work there, to have a come over for a coffee. Like, they never had any trouble.
Yeah.
But so that means it could be the same for the hotel business. Like, how can we add more different experiences, not only for short stay, but also, for example, having a cafe in the hotel for other visitors could be. Yeah, I think
Very,
that's important to
very
consider.
good. So, lastly, if people are interested to find more about your activities and the landscape architecture side, how can they do so? Where, do you have an email or a website or LinkedIn? Because I will attach this information to the show notes.
Yeah, there's a number of ways that we can connect. I'm on most of the social media platforms: Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, even, and then there's also my two websites, my book website, 12 universal laws. Sorry, it's 12lawsofnature.com. There you can find more about the book. And then what I want to do for you, Sam, is I want to open my calendar for a 30-minute consultation, a free 30-minute consultation for people that want to take action. So I'll share my Calendly link with you. I always keep, like, my schedule is very busy, but I keep a couple hours a week open for these kind of opportunities to connect with like-minded people.
Excellent. We will. This calendar will be shared to in the description of the podcast, and also in the description or show notes in the YouTube. So absolutely, that's a very nice thing that you're offering. So finally, Matthieu, I appreciate you joining today's episode, and thanks for all the fantastic insights. I think we could have a much longer discussion, and we will maybe come back at another time with a new episode.
Yeah, I think along the line we can meet again and talk more about projects that are unfolding.